Thank you for listening to the Divine Nobodies podcast with Eric Ajna and Jennifer Lynn. If you enjoy this episode, please like and subscribe so you never miss a show. If you're on Instagram, please follow us at Divine Nobodies Podcast and join our ever-growing community of lightworkers and spiritual visionaries. Together, we can raise the frequency of our planet and bring in a new era of awakening and understanding. Welcome to our tribe. And now your hosts, Eric Ajna and Jennifer Lynn.
Oh, what a fantastic evening. I said fastastic.
Yeah, what's fastastic?
I don't know.
That's a good one.
Maybe imagine it's like a completely different level above fantastic.
Yeah.
Fastastic.
It's like a quick fantastic.
Exactly. It's like you live life on the edge. You max it out every time.
I like it.
You go through your fantasticness in a much more accelerated pace.
Hey, I'm into that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wanted to ask you, Jen, you're a female. And this is speaking to all females out there. I'm a guy. I'm always looking to find out a little bit more about how women perceive men.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of the old leave behind?
A leave behind.
Yeah. So
like a marketing piece, like marketing material?
No, in terms of a relationship.
No, not really.
You can take a few guesses before I tell you what it is.
A leave behind.
Yeah, the old leave behind, not just any leave behind.
Oh, the old leave behind.
Yeah, so when you say
this makes me sound like, oh man, I should know this then. Yeah. If it's old.
Yeah, they've been using it for a long time, or at least I imagine. This is the reason why it's coming up in conversation, because I'm not too sure. So I'll give you a couple guesses as to what the leave behind is.
I mean, I don't know. When I think leave behind, because, I worked in pharmaceutical sales for so long, that's what we called our marketing pieces was leave behinds. Oh. So that way, after we left, the doctor could be like, oh, this drug. Yeah. You're leave behind.
But in relationships.
Yeah, I don't know.
So leave behind is like when you're dating somebody, right? It can go both ways, where it's like that woman or that man wants to make absolutely sure that they've sort of marked their territory. So when they come over, they leave like something behind.
Their shit behind, like underwear or,
a toothbrush or something.
Girls do that all the time.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you done the old leave behind?
I haven't, not intentionally. I mean, I've done it on accident.
So it's an unconscious thing.
It's an unconscious thing, but I feel like anytime I've done it on accident, the guy thought that I was just trying to be sneaky.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's how I see it. I've had my own experience with the old leave behind.
Old leave behind,
but like I always enter into relationships or dating with the intention of being with that person.
Yeah.
So, the old leave behind is more affirming to me than anything else.
I found an old leave behind at a guy's house that I was actually actively dating. Like It was my boyfriend. And I found a leave behind from another girl. Yeah. And this was so gross. It was her fake eyelashes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And she pulled those bitches off and left them on the counter. I can't believe that he didn't even notice them. Yeah.
I think there's a list of things that you can qualify as leave behind, because I think the intention not only is to reinforce this feeling like, okay, this is my person, but you also want to leave it like a gentle, mindful reminder to your partner so that they can remember you.
Yeah.
And I feel like eyelashes, I don't know that sort of qualifies. I'd imagine like something more like maybe your underwear or like a nice shirt or.
Yeah. Perfume.
Yeah.
A toothbrush is like, I think the most common thing.
A toothbrush?
Yeah.
Oh, you're making a huge statement when you leave a toothbrush behind.
I think so too.
Because it's almost like when you're with somebody for long enough and you feel comfortable enough to take a piss in the restroom with them actually in it with you.
Yeah.
Brushing your teeth is a pretty intimate endeavor.
Yeah. I mean, but it's also like necessary. You got to brush your teeth at night and in the morning if you're sleeping over anywhere.
That's
You don't
true.
Want to wake up with sweaters on your teeth.
Right. No, you can definitely brush your teeth, but I mean, it's like there are things that it's okay for them not to see.
Yeah.
You can be a little bit more discreet about.
Yeah,
but when you leave
agree.
like a toothbrush in somebody's restroom, that's like saying like, hey, I'm planning on fucking living here one day.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I've experienced my share of leave behinds. Wanted to know what your perspective on that is. And what it seems to be is like a collective thing that people do.
Yeah.
And with good reason. I feel like it's like you say, it's an unconscious thing. Some people just leave their shit around.
Yeah.
I
mean, some people are just messy, right?
Yeah.
And we're not good at keeping up with their stuff.
Yeah. I clear a drawer for them and I keep their old leave behind items there.
That's actually a tactic from The Secret.
Oh, really?
Is if you want a relationship and you're trying to manifest a relationship in your life, that you're supposed to not park. Like if you have a garage, you're supposed to park on one side and allow enough room for their car to be in the garage with yours. You're not supposed to sleep in the middle of the bed. You're supposed to sleep on one side. Yeah. You're supposed to clean a drawer out for them in your dresser and leave some space in the closet. So it's allowing space in your life for that person. Oh,
so the goal is to going through those motions is affirming probably the continuity of that person in your life.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So the law of attraction is you're trying to attract them by doing these sort of rituals.
Yep. By pretending that they're already there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's definitely worthy to do. I'm going to start thinking about doing that.
Yeah. It works.
Yeah. Yeah. So this came up, me and Jen were talking about, I think the aspect of relationships have come up. We did a last episode where we talk a little bit about that, but mainly because it's strange times right now. Strange times in that we're going through a lot of change, but also the way that people date and, enter into relationships is also different with the advent of things like online dating and Zoom calls as a first date, and having to know how to navigate through that isn't always so obvious.
Yeah. I mean, when I started dating, there was no such thing as online dating.
Yeah.
There definitely weren't any apps.
Yeah.
I mean, the only online dating that was like available was eHarmony and Match.com.
Yeah.
And that was kind of embarrassing. You didn't want to tell anybody that you were on Match.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of people were on Match, nobody really talked about it.
That's true. And it seems sort of like a socially acceptable thing.
Yeah.
They ask like, what type of music you listen to. It's like, hey, what kind of online dating app do you use?
Yeah.
And everybody, I get a lot of insight from other people that have used those apps, but it seems to be more widely accepted.
Yeah. I think that people have really opened up their mind to it.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of good things that come out of that. I've met people on these dating apps and have had a lot of success, but you also hear those stories about people that have used them and experienced their share of what I would consider toxic masculine, toxic femininity.
Oh, yeah.
And when I hear those stories, it's always really interesting to me. At least for me, from my Libra perspective, you kind of get an idea of where humanity is headed based off of the relationships that people have. Mm-hmm. And so you hear these stories from other people, especially mainly horror stories of, I have a lot of female friends, horror stories of what they've experienced with other men and vice versa.
Oh, yeah.
You hear it from men as well, and one of my friends actually forwarded me this really interesting document last week that I wanted to bring onto the podcast. Because it was interesting, I couldn't believe that somebody would actually do this. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to weigh out the pros and the cons to this, although obviously from my perspective is definitely a con.
Yeah.
So there's this girl that is really upfront and open about her relationships and how she connects with people on Tinder. Mm-hmm. And we all know that Tinder is more of like a hookup app, or at least that's what they say.
Yeah.
So people aren't, they're very honest about what it is that they're looking for on there. So you more or less kind of know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
But she has something called a coochie consultation form.
Okay.
Have you heard of a coochie consultation form?
Sadly, I have heard of a coochie consultation form, not in those words, but I have context clues I can pick up what this is about.
Yeah. Yeah. So she could have been, at least this person could have been a little bit more eloquent in her delivery.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Because it's not just a standard SurveyMonkey questionnaire. This was somebody that just straight up was as, dense and upfront as possible. So the coochie consultation, there's two. There's a coochie consultation request form. Okay. And then there's a coochie consultation. How was your coochie consultation? Which I imagine is something that happens after the fact.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So the request form is, and I'll go over, I'm going to read this over. I'm certain we can find some sort of spiritual underpinning here, both good and bad, but it's a questionnaire. Coochie consultation request form. And it says, honesty is the best policy.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
So, you can put in your name. And then the first one is, do you like getting head? And then the first option.
I mean, who doesn't like that?
Yeah, exactly. Right. She wants to get down to very specifics.
Okay.
Right. Hell yeah. Say less. And then the other second option is, I'm good either way. And the third option is, no, not really.
Okay.
Okay. And then the second one on here is, do you like giving head? And the first option, and these are like something that you put in a Scantron when you're a kid and you're filling out the circle.
Yeah.
You put maybe a disclaimer in here that says that if you circle outside of the line, the Scantron won't scan the answer.
Oh my God. Wouldn't that be hilarious if she had so much business that she had a Scantron machine?
Yeah. She had to put it in the Scantron. Then she had to send it back like, oh, you're you didn't fill in the circle correctly. You're going to have to do this over again.
Yeah, you have to use a number 2 pencil.
The number 2 pencil only.
Yeah, only.
Yeah.
No ink.
Yeah, exactly. no ink. So the first one on the do you like get head one is Monch, 'tis the season for giving. The second option is don't really care. If you ask me for it, I'll give it. And then the last option is nope, not my thing.
Okay.
And I'm going over all these real quick so we can talk about them afterwards. And then it has an option for positions.
Okay.
And there are asterisks here. So there are some questions on here that are optional.
Okay.
And some of them that absolutely must be filled out.
Okay. Got it.
Right. So the position options are doggy, missionary, cowgirl, spooning, all of the above, and another. Fill in the blank.
Okay.
You know, for the creative types that don't have these options covered. And then what are you into? Option 1, plain good old sex, missionary, doggy style. Let's add some spice, choking and slapping, and full send, anal and handcuffs, etc.
Oh, okay.
Right? And then this is actually the first time I've read the whole thing. I'm almost done, but I only read like the first couple, and I was like,
You're like, this is unbelievable.
This is unbelievable. This is the world that we live in. And then, do you have your own place to do the deed?
Oh my God. That is such a relevant question though.
It is.
I mean,
it was an asterisk. So
especially now during COVID, a lot of people have had a change in living circumstances. So.
Yeah. Like it says, no, sorry. And then second option is, yep. And then third option is, it's complicated. This will have to be explained. Yeah. Yeah. And then length of size doesn't always matter. It's the motion of the ocean. So she asked for the size in inches.
Yeah.
Right? So there are a few options for that.
Oh, everybody lies about that. Come on.
Yeah.
It's like height.
And then Snapchat IG. So you have to give your IG handle so that she knows
that you're real and you're not a creeper.
Right. Right. And then what are you expecting out of this experience? The first option is food, conversation, sex. Second option is small talk. Then let's bang it out. And then the third option is let's get down to business to defeat the Huns.
To defeat the Huns?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand that one.
I don't know what that one is too. It might be like an inside joke sort of thing. And then the last thing is something you think I should know about you. And then your answer. And there's actually a submit button here. You can submit.
Oh, so this is an online form?
Yeah, it's actually a Google Doc.
Wow.
I'm looking at
okay.
It's a Google form. So
what did she do with this market research?
So very professional of her to do that. And I'm just going to look over the how was your coochie consultation form really quick. It says, how was the head on a scale of 1 to 5, lowest being lame, highest being immaculate. Mm-hmm. And then I apologize, guys. The only reason why I wanted to bring this up is because, the truth is out there. Well, not the truth, but like this is as direct and as real as it gets.
This is real life shit.
This is real life shit.
Yeah.
This is actually happening right now in the dating world.
Someone created this document and it is out here in the universe for us to talk about on this podcast.
Exactly. And then the other option is wetness, ? Dry as the lowest option, 1 being dry as the Sahara. Damn, get some lube. And then 5 being moister than an oyster.
Okay.
Okay. And then tightness, hot dog in a hallway being the lowest one.
Yeah.
And then 5, gorilla grip pussy.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I like how you're blushing. This is hilarious.
Sense of humor. And then the other option is, am I blushing?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. What did you enjoy about this experience? 4 options, 1 being choking, 2nd, dirty talk, chatting, the whole damn experience. And level of disrespect, which I don't understand this. One of the questions is level of disrespect, lowest being, I'd rather not, no choking, no slapping. And then 5 being, let's tie this bitch up.
Okay.
So I think it's what if there was any intensity?
Yeah.
Right. A rating system for intensity. Like, was it too intense? Like, did you not like the fact that she choked you out while you were orgasming?
Yeah.
It's like they're rating her level of intensity.
Got it.
Or
okay.
maybe kinkiness or whatever.
Okay. All right.
And then would you repeat? And she says, yeah, sure. And no, I'm good. Thanks though. She says, thanks though.
Thanks though.
Yeah. And then comments, questions, concerns, your answer, and then the old submit form. I don't know who this is going to, but this person obviously has an administrative position in her life that involves having to create spreadsheets and maybe moderating a SurveyMonkey account. But I imagine this is the reason why I wanted to talk about this, because I can appreciate the honesty.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the difficulty and the challenges that come up, especially in online dating, that people go through, as far as like that toxicity has to do with a lack of communication and dishonesty about what your intentions are.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And you could, you can get by with a lot by just being honest about what your true intentions are in the beginning. So the fact that she's coming up and she's like, hey, I have this coochie consultation form.
Yeah.
And she gets down to specifics.
Yeah.
There's something to respect about that.
Right.
But it is also toxic masculinity at its like finest.
At its finest. That is a perfect example of toxic masculinity.
Right. So it's like, what do you think that she would need that type of information for?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Like, what are you going to do with this? Like, this isn't like a product that you can improve. Right. Well, I guess maybe in a way you could improve it, but and I think that's what are you doing with this market research?
I think that's what you're saying. It's like she's looking at it in the same way that people would look at an object.
Right.
Right. Like, how can we improve this MacBook Pro, or how can we improve the speed of your Wi-Fi connection?
Right.
They're looking at you like you are an artificially intelligent creature that doesn't have feelings, and you're doing a service, strictly a service for them, or they're doing a service for you. She's objectifying herself.
Right.
So.
And that's the catch-22. Like, this to me screams daddy issues all over it.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, like, maybe she just really enjoys this. I don't know.
That's true. And the reason why she kind of in some ways gets a pass is because she's being open and upfront and honest.
Yeah.
And if you're being open and upfront and honest with anybody that you meet on Tinder, they know what they're getting.
Yeah.
And you can't say I didn't tell you so.
Right.
So I can see it from that perspective, but it doesn't contribute to, a wholesome sort of like real connection.
Right.
Unless you're somebody that is down for that type of thing. So she gets a pass for just being open and upfront, but it definitely is toxic masculine trait.
Oh, totally.
And it does speak to almost like this wanting and needing validation. Like, there are just some things that are just better left to mystery, and things that are some things that are just better left to, chalking it up as like an experience. The fact that she needs to know every single specific little thing about her performance speaks to a large insecurity and maybe a low self-esteem.
100%. And I'm curious to know how old she is, because this to me sounds like a much younger person.
22.
That makes sense.
Right.
This makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So she's thinking like, oh, I'm gonna sound cool if I beat a guy to the punchline and I'm more masculine than he is.
Right.
So then I can't get hurt.
Yeah.
So this makes sense to me.
Yeah.
This makes sense to me.
Yeah. And that's even more scary because me and you happen to be older.
Yeah.
And we were part of obviously a very different type of generation. And when I was sent this to me, there have been way too many times where somebody has sent something to me that came from, a generation past the millennials, where it ended up happening to be a socially acceptable thing. Like, this is something people do now.
Yeah.
And it's a very dangerous thing.
Oh yeah. It's super dangerous. It's all fun and games till somebody gets an STD or pregnant.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's like, it asks for your name. If you're intelligent, you probably wouldn't put your name down, but it's incriminating too. They can use that information against you.
100%. So yeah, that reminds me of a story. I actually know a guy that created an app, and it's, I don't remember the name of it. I think it's called Black Book. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah. But it was, it had people's names, and you could rate sexual partners if you ever hooked up with that person. You could submit them, and submit a rating on them. And then they would go into this database, and other people could search your name and check out your rating. But it wasn't like Yelp where you could see, the person who was rating you. Yeah. So it's all anonymous.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting theory, right? But it's horrible whenever people use that as a tool to sabotage another person. Like maybe you have a crazy ex, and then they put your name in there, and they're like 000, smallest dick ever. And, it's more like a hate crime.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's definitely interesting. And I wanted to open that up to basically just a conversation about online dating, but also toxic masculine, toxic femininity. And it seems to be sort of a lot more widespread now, but at the same time, on the opposite side of the coin, you have a lot more movements, a lot more movements out there that are sort of combating this. You have Sacred Sons, and Sacred Sons is a men's group, And I've actually gone to a lot of their events, but also dialed into their Zoom calls. It's basically a bunch of men that have the collective goal of healing their inner child and healing that little boy inside of them so that they can better show up as a man for not even just the woman in their life, but just for themselves in general. Mm-hmm. And it's a really progressive, innovative thing because as a man, you didn't have a whole lot of that growing up. It was always about, men face a lot of pressure in the same way, in varying different ways. Women also face a lot of pressure, but for a man, I'd grown up with this idea that like men needed to be strong. Mm-hmm. They couldn't have feelings. They couldn't express their feelings openly. And if you did, then you'd be seen as weak.
Right.
And I've experienced that pressure from both men and women. Mm-hmm. And when you're younger, you don't, quite know what the difference is. But as you get older, you realize how toxic that really is.
Oh, yeah, so absolutely.
The Sacred Sons group is this men's group that goes through a lot of different exercises to teach you how to embody both your male and your female energy, because that is what constitutes a divine masculine man.
Right.
So from a female's perspective, I'm seeing a lot of these goddess groups of women kind of gathering together to do the same thing, mm-hmm. but from a female perspective.
Right.
Which is healing, those traumas and those wounds that they've experienced at the hands of other men, mm-hmm. and healing the relationship with, maybe a toxic masculine figure in their life, and healing from really traumatic experiences that they may have gone through, when they were young, maybe, sexual experiences or mm-hmm. things that cause that sort of trauma.
I mean, yeah. And in this, to me, if I had to take a guess, this 22-year-old girl that has this coochie consultation out probably has suffered some type of sexual abuse in her life.
Right.
How
do you think that ties together? Like with the sexual abuse and the needing to have or want validation like that through a document?
I don't know. I just know that there's a correlation between hypersexuality and sexual abuse as a child.
That's true.
And there is a lot of data that supports that, but I don't know. I don't know any further rationale other than that.
The interesting thing, and that's a really good thing that you bring up, is over the pendulum swinging really far in each direction.
Yeah.
Like hypersexualized women is a thing now in mainstream media. And it's the same thing, I think, for men. The standards are so unbelievably high nowadays. And we have things like Instagram and social media that set the standard for us, but also for children.
Yeah.
And so we're growing up with these impossible sort of standards and this impossible perspective of like how a man should look, mm-hmm. how a woman should look.
Oh, yeah.
And that's designing the way that we see potential partners.
Right.
And I've thought about this, and if we don't get this sort of thing checked, well, the potential risk is that we'll run into a sort of like Johnny Depp and Amber Heard situation.
Oh, for sure.
Right. Which I've been kind of following. I don't follow it too much of celebrity gossip, but it came up in a conversation because when you think of Johnny Depp, he was somebody from my childhood, and he's just a figure in pop culture.
Oh, yeah.
And
Huge.
I heard the story behind, what happened between him and Amber Heard and them having all these fights and altercations. Did you hear about that?
Yeah. Yes.
And
a friend of mine is his attorney. So
the perspective I'm taking is that she's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say, right? My grandma always says, believe nothing that you hear and only half of what you see.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to matters of the heart and in relationships, you never know. You never know what goes on behind closed doors, and there's attorneys involved and money and lies and media.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just no way to know what the real truth is.
Yeah, there's no way to know. And I've listened to the telephone conversations between them.
Oh yeah.
And the videos and just her behavior in general, which seems to be really unstable.
Really unstable, just kind of erratic.
Just very erratic, very unstable, has that sort of cluster B type of on the spectrum personality. Mm-hmm. And, Johnny Depp, he may very well be that. But the whole point bringing all of this up is that it's led to a really huge imbalance in how men and women show up for each other in relationships.
Yeah. There's a book, and I haven't read it, but I think it would be a good book to read. It's by Jack Myers. It's called The Future of Men, Masculinity in the 21st Century. And what what this book kind of talks about is what masculinity looks like now. You know, there's so many more guys that are staying at home to be stay-at-home dads, which was like almost unheard of before.
Yeah.
And kind of like the shift of feminism, right? And how feminism is such a hot topic. And women aren't just talking about it, they're putting action behind it. So I was just reading some of the statistics that he quoted was that as you graduate from college, more jobs are requiring a college degree, right? And 40% of college degrees are going to men versus 60% that are going to women. So that's a complete flip from what it was in the 70s. So now more women are getting college degrees than men, which I thought was really interesting. And economically speaking, for people under 30, single and unmarried women are actually out earning their male counterparts that are single and unmarried.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
And they're outnumbering that by almost 20%.
Yeah.
So which seems like a lot.
Yeah. Women they're taking over. And I think a lot of that is a result of the fact that a lot of women are just getting tired. Mm-hmm. And then there are also men like myself that are supporting those movements. Like I understand, I have a lot of female friends that all throughout my life, especially growing up when I was in high school, a lot of my friends were female. Yeah. And one after the other, I'd always just hear stories about men that just did the most terrible things to them, you know, and I was one of those people that they'd come to. And I'm also a man. So it confused me because I wanted to embody my masculinity, but I couldn't relate to men because I just identified them as being these big assholes.
Right.
So it sort of like led to an interesting path for me growing up, but it doesn't surprise me that now we're getting to a place, especially because gender equality and women's rights and feminism is coming more into the forefront now. They have more of a voice. It doesn't surprise me that the tables are kind of turning, you know, and what I think when I think of like gender roles, just from the start, men and women should be treated equally. Men and women should get paid equally. But I try and look back to kind of how all of this started, right? So all of this started with, I imagine like Homo sapiens thousands or hundreds of years ago, where men were hunter-gatherers and women, they were only seen as weak, mainly because there was a certain period of time when they were pregnant with kids where they had to stay at home or they had to sort of shelter and they had to be protected because if you're not protected when you're pregnant, it leaves you vulnerable to being attacked.
Right.
And I think for the most part, the hunter-gatherer thing to me didn't just start with the men. Everybody knows what they need to survive. So everybody needs to be able to hunt and be able to eat and things like that. But I think that whole gender inequality thing came into the field is when it came into like farming.
Yeah.
It came into farming where men were out working, and because women, of course, still had to maintain the lives of their children and also be pregnant, they were more prone to doing work on the inside of the house. But there was a difference. They communicated. I imagine there was a really strong communication there as to what the contribution was.
Oh, for sure.
It wasn't this feeling of like, you're inferior, so you need to stay home.
Yeah.
It was this collaboration that took place.
Right.
And I think that's one of the most important things about this is about communication, right? The toxic thing about masculinity now, from both perspectives, is that how people define strength.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it seems that in some feminist groups that what they see as strength is doing everything that a guy can do, almost as a way to prove to them that they're worthy and that they're strong enough.
Right.
And to me, that isn't the greatest example that you can give of strength, because you're saying that those softer sides of you, those vulnerable sides of you, these emotional sides of you don't count.
Right.
So what I actually define strength as is your ability to tap into both your masculine and your feminine energies. And I see women in a lot of ways as, this isn't a contest as to who is better than the other, but it is a very strong, a radically strong thing to be in touch with your feelings.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. I think it's, I really struggle with the word feminism because I feel like it's changed and it's evolved over time into something that I just like can't identify with. It's too extreme. In my mind, whenever I was younger and I would call myself a feminist, in my mind, it was working toward equality for women, not superiority.
Right.
And now feminism has evolved into being superior to men. And I don't think that was the original intent. It was just like, hey, we're just here to challenge the systemic inequalities that we're facing in the workplace.
Right, the patriarchy.
Socially. Yeah. But not to be superior,
right.
like I think both genders should be treated equally.
Right. I think like what you said, quality versus superiority.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It totally makes sense. Like when I think back and when I retrospect about this whole thing, I think of how we all have a sort of primitive brain. There's this sort of left-right hemisphere that nature sort of exemplifies in us, which is we have our left and our right sides of our brain hemispheres.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And they're both responsible for two different things. One of them is for logical thinking. The other one is more creative. Mm-hmm. And we have that sort of balance in everything in life in the same way that we have a left Democratic side and then we have a Republican right side. And
right.
in a lot of ways, you can say that those are almost like the right and left hemispheres of the brain. Some of them are a little bit more conservative. The other ones are a little bit more progressive.
Right.
So it seems that like we have both polarities, and the same thing with divine or masculine and feminine traits. One can be seen as strong. The other one can be seen as strong just in a different way. So I think it comes down to definition.
Yeah.
Right. So we start on our journey at the root chakra, which is our survival. And maybe at that point, we haven't yet awakened to that spiritual aspect of ourselves. So we succumb to more of the bodily functions mm-hmm. of who we are. We succumb to just needing shelter, needing to eat something, mm-hmm. and needing to procreate.
Yeah.
And that's the reference that people normally, in that sort of argument of people that are more conservative, it's like, oh yeah, these conservative gender roles are how things were. This is how things need to be now. But I think what happens is spirituality enters into the field. As you go from your root up to your sacral and up to your solar plexus and up to your heart, you start to awaken to a different type of energy. And that energy can perceive those primitive functions. And once it awakens to itself, then it doesn't need to work in just sort of an animalistic, primitive way anymore. Mm-hmm. Like you can break out of those sort of definitions of left and right and male and female. And now you're just looking at it from spirit.
Right.
But you have to, in order to get to that point, you have to integrate your, when you're a man or a woman, your divine masculine and divine feminine qualities. You have to be super in touch with your feelings, but you also have to be really strong in the fact that you can take care of yourself. And I think once you've arrived to those two places, mm-hmm. then let me give you like an example, right? Aliens, right? Of course.
Of course.
I was trying to find a segue into aliens.
I was like, of course we're going to talk about aliens.
Yeah. So aliens, when people talk stories about aliens, they're seen as mostly small mouths, if not no mouths at all, because mm-hmm. they don't use their mouths to communicate, telepathically. Right. And their eyes, which are bigger because they've somehow evolved to be able to see more. Mm-hmm. But they're also very small. They don't have any hair. And from what I've read, they also don't have reproductive organs, right?
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, no
you're
reproductive organs. So what does that speak to? An evolutionary standpoint is that, if we don't, no longer talk and we're speaking telepathically, then you naturally lose those things.
Right.
So I look at it in the same way as like once you awaken to sort of like maybe your divinity within, you start evolving and your spirit evolves. And what I'm trying to point to is that sort of hunter-gatherer, women stays at home is antiquated.
Yeah.
It is no longer relevant.
That's not.
We are waking up to something much more profound, mm-hmm. which is the integration between masculine and feminine energies. Mm-hmm. And the reason why those relationships exist from a universal perspective is that we are trying to reinforce and cultivate the really powerful force of God here on earth.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And the perfect example of that is the fact that women can have children. The love that I have for my partner, the love she has for me can create life. That is the number one indicator that we embody the functions of God.
Who was, we were talking about this earlier today. What was the name of the guest that Rogan had on his podcast that got abducted by aliens?
Oh, the guy that got abducted by aliens?
Yeah. What's his name? I was just looking it up and I was like, what is this name?
I think I actually have let Okay. His name is Travis Walton.
Travis Walton. Yeah. So I watched a little
the Fire
clip.
in the Sky guy.
Yeah. Fire in the Sky. Yeah. So I watched a little clip on him, and he was talking about his experience from being abducted and what the aliens look like and just how you described them. No hair, big eyes,
Yeah.
you know, they communicate telepathically. And he was like, yeah. And they made no expressions. Like there were no facial expressions. And I was kind of laughing to myself because their skin is all smooth. And I was like, yeah, that's how I look after I get a face full of Botox. Oh, shit. I can't make an expression or I'm all smooth.
Yeah.
So channeling my aliens.
I watched that today, the one with Joe Rogan and him.
Yeah.
And that guy's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Right. That Fire in the Sky movie came out, in the mid to late 90s?
Yeah.
And it was one of the most prolific stories of its time. And at the time it came out, it wasn't really widely accepted. I feel like now.
People are much more open-minded to it.
Much more open-minded. But I kind of put him up there with Bob Lazar because he tells a very vivid story of how he was abducted.
Yeah.
And if you go deeper into that interview, long story short, like he was afraid. And the cool thing about this interview is he years ago after it happened, he thought that possibly the aliens are trying to hurt him. But after he had 40 years to actually think about what happened, it was his own fear.
Yeah.
And he realized that those aliens actually probably were there to help him. I mean, they dropped his ass off.
Yeah. They returned him.
They returned him. They didn't have to return him.
And they fixed him,
and
right?
They fixed him. What happened was after he initially got afraid and he took something off of the floor, which was like this glass object, and he kind of used that to swing at them.
Do you think it was a crystal?
It could have been a crystal.
Because he described it like a clear, he was like, I don't know, like a clear, like spear object. And I was like, I wonder if it was a crystal.
Yeah, that was a question Joe Rogan asked. And I wanted to know too, because I mean, it'd have to be an alien nonetheless. Right. But he couldn't define it. He said he was more concerned with his fear that he was experiencing. But when he pushed them over, one, he said that they were really light and they were almost just air, you know?
Yeah.
So they left and they came back, and I think 2 people came back that actually were people.
Yeah.
He said they looked like people anyways. One was tall and they had sort of light hair. And first thought that comes in my mind is like, maybe they were Pleiadians.
Pleiadians. Yeah.
Yeah. And the goal he thought was that maybe they were trying to calm him down by bringing in somebody that looks more like him.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And they returned to him. You know, the interesting thing about that conversation was he was thinking of the possible reason why aliens chose that spot in Arizona. That was in Snowflake, Arizona, where that whole thing happened.
Okay.
And they were sort of waxing poetic about the possibilities, but he said that area got more lightning strikes than most areas in the world.
Interesting.
Right. And he was thinking, okay, well, what happens when lightning strikes these trees? It creates this thing called fulgurite. Mm-hmm. And if you see it, you can actually pull it up on the internet. It's like this crystal where the lightning strikes the wood and it creates this mineral called fulgurite.
Yeah. And
it creates all these really amazing geometric sort of patterns in this crystal. And a lot of people in the spiritual community look at it in the same way that they look at moldavite, because that's kind of what moldavite is. Moldavite's not at all a lightning strike, but it's the product of a meteor strike.
Yeah.
So they automatically feel as though it has these alien type of qualities to it. But he was thinking that maybe they came here to, farm this crystal for use in maybe their spacecraft or something.
Yeah. Interesting.
But that was just, the story that he gave. But yeah, when we were talking about aliens, the reason why that sort of kind of all goes together is that like humans change, we evolve.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that have these conservative values, and it's totally fine to have that. But at some point where your society is evolving spiritually and emotionally, you have to move with it. And I think the progression is going towards equality.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah.
100% with you on that. Yeah, it seems like just the support that men are getting for this change, right? Like as we change from an environment from the woman being the subservient one in the house and the man being the leader and the head of the household, and how those roles are swapping, it seems like men get so much less support than women get. Because churches, local organizations, community groups, like everything is supporting women. There's not anything really that's out there to support men. Yeah. I mean, a few things, like you talked about the Sacred Sons organization, but you don't hear a lot about that. It's like women's shelters. It's, Mother's Day Out, how those churches do that, where you can drop your kids off and they'll watch them for free, and all of that jazz.
That's true.
So
that's true.
There's while there are some changes, like I think in the next 20 years we're going to see some major changes in gender roles.
Yeah, but
even more so than now.
Yeah, I think the important thing is that we're talking about it. But the one thing that I kind of wanted to point out, just being in the spiritual community, is being a feminist for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Right. And that is the one reason why people, when they think of feminism, they're like, oh, that's just a crazy feminist that hates men.
Yeah.
And the reason why that's a conversation is because those are a lot of people you see.
Yeah.
Because they're the loudest ones.
Right.
It's, and
I feel like it's kind of like the news though. Anytime something happens in Texas or in Florida, they find the one guy from the swamp with 2 teeth to interview,
true.
as the spokesperson for whatever event happened.
Right.
And, it's like, why do we keep choosing this guy? I don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. But the extroverted people, I think just statistically are the ones that, put their foot forward, faster than anybody else, or the loudest ones you hear first.
Right.
And especially for these type of feminist groups where they don't necessarily have one specific leader, there's these loud people that speak on behalf of everybody.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the best, I am all for feminism 100%. And I, as a way to contribute to that movement, have done a lot of work on myself in order to heal, toxic masculine traits inside of me, because if you're part of the Western society, I mean, you're going to invoke those to some degree,
right?
Because everything in media, everything that you're taught teaches you how to separate. There's like a divisive sort of thinking, like you are different from this woman in all these different ways. And men and women have used that as a way to undermine each other's integrity and undermine each other just in general.
Right.
So you don't want to be a feminist because you hate men. You want to be a feminist because you deeply care about the balance that exists between men and women.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I
knew this girl a long time ago, and I'll share like a personal story. And we were living together at the time, and she was at one of those divine goddess retreats for women. And for those that aren't familiar with these retreats, it's a nice safe space, just like we were talking about those men's and women's group, where all the women come together and they talk about different things that they're going through. And they do like yoni steaming, and they all have their own little rituals, and they all pull cards. It's just like a nice little social group.
Right.
And I'm all for that. And one day, she was going to be gone for a whole weekend, and then she ended up coming back home, and I bought some flowers for her, and wanted them to be there for when she came home.
Yeah.
So she came home, and there was this nest of doves that was above the door in our place. And there was a very sacred, very sort of metaphorical reason as to why they were there, according to her, and also according to me. Doves signify a lot of really amazing things.
Yeah,
right?
And doves are a symbol of love.
Doves are a symbol of love. And so we'd always, we collaborated and joined together, and we always celebrated the fact that they were there, because we had these doves at the top of the door, and they had little babies, and they were always there. And, I would do sound healing for them, and it was just a whole ordeal. And it was a nice feeling to have that sort of support from the sort of animal kingdom.
Yeah, it's awesome.
One day she comes home and the nest is gone. Like I don't know if it fell on the floor. I don't know if maybe the landlord caught it, but the nest had disappeared.
Yeah.
And she was just really upset by the fact that this happened. And rightly so. I would too. I just didn't know that that's what happened.
Right.
So she came home just really, really upset. And she told me what happened, and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. But she thought I did something.
Why would she think you did something?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
That's crazy.
Still to this day, that's just one of those things that's going to go down as an unsolved mystery in my book, because still to this day, I don't know why she thought that it would have been me.
Yeah.
Right? So obviously I didn't get a whole lot of miles with the flowers. That was sort of like an afterthought. But the reason why I bring this up is because one, what she had shared, when you're going into all of these groups, sometimes you're around a lot of stories that women share about how men have fucked them over somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody's going over, I was cheated on, and you're turning to your sisters in order to get advice on what to do. And in these men's group, it's the same thing. We share a lot of personal stories, a lot of like really dense emotions.
Yeah.
Females do the same thing.
Right.
But what happens if you're not grounded is that you can let those things affect you, and you can leave one of those circles hating men.
Yes.
And hating women at the same time.
Yes, you can.
So, you know, on this particular instance, I felt that aggression. Like I felt that, like, when she looked into my eyes, that anger that she felt over, you know, the brothers.
Right.
And what they had done to these women.
Right.
And then because I was a man and the only man in the room, I just happened to get the blunt force of that.
Yeah. Guilty by association.
Guilty by association.
Yeah.
And I remember just her screaming out, "This is why I hate masculine energy." Out of nowhere. And given,
like, what?
I'm being 100% honest in the fact that I held space for her, and I was like, "What's wrong? Did something happen over there? Are you okay?
Yeah.
Is everything fine?" I was holding space in the way that I know how.
Yeah.
And I know that it wasn't me, but obviously she was unloading a lot of different emotions that she probably inherited, or maybe emotions that she were going through.
Yeah. And you know, most of the women in those circles are strong empaths, and they feel so much when other people are hurting, you know, and if you're not grounded, just like you said, and you take on those emotions and you take all of that negative energy with you, I can see why it would bubble up and bother her after she was home.
Yeah. Yeah. And I did my best to hold space, and we kind of worked through that situation, but it's so easy. And the reason why I bring it up is it's so easy to get angry. It's so easy because everybody has experienced their fair share of injustices at the hands of the opposite sex.
Oh, for sure.
And even if I think of a handful of experiences that I've gone through, I mean, it's easy to fall into that and be like, men are assholes and women are bitches. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's so easy. And the sad thing is that it's so easy that a lot of people unconsciously advocate for that. Like, I've met more people in those groups that are doing it because they hate men than doing it because they want and believe in the dynamic and the collaboration between the two.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's really sad. That's really sad.
Yeah, it is really sad. So I think for me, I want to take myself out of the definitions of gender roles and really look at kind of like the core of what the real task is at hand, which is acknowledging that both men and women contain both of those energies. We have a feminine side, we have a masculine side.
Yeah.
And I think the division comes because people think they need to pick one.
Yeah, you don't have to pick one. You're supposed to embody both.
You're supposed to embody both.
Yeah. You know, I catch myself because I have a lot of masculine energy, like even in my birth chart, I have a lot of masculine. So I have to be really careful because my partner is a masculine guy too, but also very sensitive. I'm married to a Cancer, and he gets his feelings hurt, and I have to watch myself.
Yeah. It's almost like we seem to choose partners that contain a quality that we either don't have or we want to strive to get to.
Right.
Right. Like I'm a lot softer. I'm a Libra sun and a Gemini moon. My planet is Venus. So I've always been that sort of lover, that hopeless romantic.
Yeah.
And that's got me a long way in my life, but it's also kind of sabotaged my relationships in some ways because I can sometimes overly romanticize situations and people that aren't good for me.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I've always found myself going after or end up with women that were more extroverted.
Yeah.
You know,
and also a little bit more dominant.
A little bit more dominant. And that's the thing is it isn't a thing about being good or bad. Like there are some relationships that some relationships that I even know that just comfortably work that way.
Yeah.
It just comes down to communication, your shared values, and how you guys work together to balance out that energy.
Right.
Because there are some women that, you know, they love a man to sort of be more assertive and to be more dominant. And there are some relationships where the woman, you know, wants to feel like the leader, and it only becomes a toxic thing when those parameters aren't discussed.
Right.
You know, when those things aren't openly communicated, you know. But I find like I find that like we look for partners that can teach us how to discover those aspects in ourselves. And I think that I've gotten that. Have you gotten that in your relationship? Has your relationships kind of showed you how to be a little bit more softer?
Yeah, they definitely have over the years. And I've gotten some feedback from some partners that have told me, you know, like, you're too cold, you're too aloof, you know, which is true. And I see those qualities in myself, and those are qualities that I know I need to work on. I'm about as warm and fuzzy as a cactus. You know, I'm just like,
cactuses are pretty warm and fuzzy though.
Not if you want to bleed.
That's true. Cause you touch them and you're
So
fucked basically.
Yeah. I'm not very warm and fuzzy.
They're very hydrating though. And
they are hydrating.
They can help you trip the fuck out.
That's true. That's true. Also one of my specialties.
Yeah.
But, I've definitely had some learnings with relationships, and just taking that constructive feedback from your past partners, if you can still have, you know, conversations with them. And I've been lucky enough that all of my relationships have ended in a very good, healthy way.
Yeah. You sent them, did you send them an updated coochie consultation form?
Oh, hell no. Oh my gosh. That just, I'm still a little wrapped around the axle on that one. That one's got me a little twisted.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, when you were talking about social media earlier, I hate to circle back to this, but I was thinking about TikTok, because that's like a huge thing with the kids right now, you know? And
I still don't get it though, by the way.
I don't either. I'm too old and just an old lady on TikTok.
I don't think it has anything to do with age. I just don't think that there's a functional reason for it to exist. I mean, like I get the whole recording a few minutes or a few seconds of video, but what I don't understand is how they use it, you know, because from my experience, I mean, I feel like people get pretty creative with it.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing a lot more like women in their, you know, mid to late 20s, early 30s, just going on there looking for validation from somebody.
Yeah.
By just dancing around in their booty shorts and doing this really sort of horribly choreographed dancing.
Yes. And the dances are very popular. And that's what I was going to, is you look at these girls in their booty shorts and their low cut tops doing these dances, and they're raking in followers so much faster than their male counterparts that are doing the same dance, right? Like, even if your male counterpart is a better dancer than you, you're still not going to have you're still going to have more followers than he is, because of the way that you're objectifying yourself.
It's true. And that's a sad truth. Just being as a man, I have my own Instagram and social media accounts, and not that my objective is to find as many followers as somebody much bigger, but you can see the inconsistency. You can see the difference. Mm-hmm. You know, you can go on one profile and you just see, you know, 2 million followers for a girl that just has exclusively just photos of herself dancing around. And I'm all about for, you know, like creative expression. Mm-hmm. I don't draw any lines when it comes to creative expression. You can be as creative as you want. You can, you know, be as expressive as you want. Mm-hmm. I'm not ever going to say that anything is bad, but I think the difficulty, the part that I see as bad is how it negatively impacts other people.
Right.
You know, because somebody's going to look at that. Maybe it's like a child that's like, you know, 10 or 11 years old, and they think that they should be doing this, or they think that this is what they need to do in order to get these amount of followers. One, we shouldn't be looking for validation through things like social media just in general, but that's the world that we're living in.
You know, what's sad is, you know, these younger children that are looking up to these older girls, just like I looked up to older girls when I was younger, like, oh, she's so pretty. Oh, I can't wait to, you know, till I'm older and I have boobs and, you know, X, Y, Z, is that the images that are portrayed now are not real. Yeah, they're not even real people. I mean, the videos are filtered, the photos are filtered to, I don't know, and everybody looks the same. I don't know if you noticed that, like all of the plastic surgery that the girls are getting and all the fillers and all the, you know, everybody looks like Kim Kardashian with the big lips and the small nose and the heavy contour and, you know, I don't know. I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it either, but I try and keep a balanced perspective. When I look at things like makeup and aesthetics and things like that, it always reminds me of Native American tribes that wear the tribal makeup, or they're putting spikes in their nose, or they're putting cylinders in their ears. I mean, I'm sure there was somebody around that time that was just like, hey, you know, you don't got to put cylinders in your ears in order to get sort of self-validation or whatever. Yeah. So the way I'm trying to look at it is that way. Like, it's just all expression, because fundamentally at the core, I think it's all God. Yeah. Right. So it's hard to say what's good or bad, because at the same time, the people that are being subject to this type of stuff, they need to be able to take accountability for their own life and develop that strength to not overly identify with these other people are doing.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, and I think that it all to me always traces back to awareness and of the polarities that exist in our world, which is having a balanced perspective.
Yeah. I read I thought that this was interesting, and I wanted to bring up models. Okay. Like women who are in the profession to be objectified, right? Like that's a conscious choice to do that. Yeah. And I saw this, like kind of like historic, when I was doing a little research for this show, this Gucci campaign. Gucci. And this woman came out and had a G shaved into, like edged into her pubic hair.
Oh, like that spot?
The Gucci G,
like the hood above, like the top. Oh, I see. Yeah.
And I was thinking about that, like, and high fashion is just modeling, the whole nine is such an objective type industry, but playing devil's advocate here, like the girl who is participating in this, like maybe this is her form of artistic expression. Maybe she takes pride in her work and she really enjoys this.
That's what they say, And if somebody asks them that question, that's probably what they would say.
Right.
But it's like, where do you draw the line? I think to me, it speaks to, you need all these different objections and all these different types of people that are telling you that it's good and it's bad in order to be able to formulate your own conclusions.
Yeah.
And I think that even though you form a conclusion, it's still not a definitive. I think it's just perspective. Yeah. Like all of these, the light, especially in light work, that we always acknowledging the light and the shadow working together, those can be looked at as the same thing. You have a lot of goody goods on one side of the spectrum that are doing everything right. And then you have all these people that are just fucking shit up on the other.
Yeah.
Right. And both of those, are always going at each other all the time. It's like Batman always needs the Joker to exist. He's the most worthy adversary. Like they need to have each other in order for this balance to exist. And the same thing with, Satan and God, but what Satan doesn't realize is that he actually is God. So they're both the same force, just bouncing those sort of ideologies back and forth at each other. And I think the whole point isn't to eradicate one or the other, because if we got rid of all the bad in the world, we would have no sense of what's good and vice versa.
Yeah.
So I think the whole point is using all those experiences as a stepping stone for awakening.
I like that. A stepping stone for awakening.
Yeah, because you need to have all of those experiences. Even when you think back at all of the most traumatic and also the greatest experiences that you've had, they've helped cultivate the person that you are now, which happens to be, this woman that's on this quest for enlightenment and awakening. Now, there's a chance that if you didn't go through those experiences, you wouldn't be here in this field.
Oh yeah. I would agree with that. I would agree with that, just from a personal space, right?
Yeah.
I had a really rough childhood, and growing up was hard, and because of those experiences, I saw hate and ugliness like really early at a young age, and had to grow up really fast, and as an adult, you're able to take an inventory of your life. You really understand like how that hate and ugliness has really changed you in a positive way.
Right.
Right. And who was it that was telling us that story? Oh, Gem Goddess, whenever she was on, and she was talking about being in school and her teacher asking her to share a negative experience that, turned into something positive. And she used the death of her father as the negative experience that ended up being something positive. And she was judged for that, right? Like her teacher judged her and was like, oh, how could you say that?
Yeah.
But everybody has to live their own experience.
Yeah.
I can't live experiences through you, just like you can't live experiences through me. We have to do that ourselves.
Right. I had an experience very similar to what the Gem Goddess had gone through when I was in, I think it was 10th grade, where you know how they have those, I think it's a social studies type of class where they have you participate in debates.
Yeah. So
you pick a side and you have to present your argument as a way to sort of combat the belief of the person that you're debating with. I actually chose abortion. whether or not it was something that was good, whether or not it was something that was bad.
And that's something that you could talk about in school.
Yeah.
When we were in school, right?
Right. And that was something you could talk about, but they weren't very clear to me as to, how deep down the rabbit hole of that you can go.
Yeah.
Now, I believe that everybody should have the option to, do whatever they want with their bodies. But because I was younger, and this is just sort of the stance that I took, is I chose against abortion. So what I did was I thought, okay, let's just go to the source, which is something that I invoked growing up and as I get older, which is like, you want to get down to spiritual freedom, you got to get to the very core of what you're trying to look for.
Right.
So when I did that with this class, I ended up finding photos of abortions on the internet.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I printed them out.
Holy shit.
Brought them to the class.
Oh my Lord.
Passed them out to the kids.
Eric.
Upside down on the table so that, so that they can flip it over and see.
No.
And
did you get suspended?
I didn't get suspended, but I got in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Right. Because How old are you?
Just curious.
I was a teenager. So I was like 10th grade.
Oh, okay.
I was that old.
Okay.
So obviously naive in a lot of ways, but also the social justice warrior.
Yeah.
Part one.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I did that, and there was truth in that, obviously. But when you're a kid, there are things that are appropriate and things that aren't.
Right.
And that for that classroom and for that teacher was inappropriate.
Right.
Even though the truth was there.
Right.
Right. And I'm not going to take a stance on for or against. That's just the stance that I took at that time.
Right.
And even though it was the truth, it's an ugly scenario. That did not award me any points during that time. I actually got in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. I mean, just with the whole graphic photo in Singapore and other countries, other Asian countries, they have photos of cancer and abortions and things like that on the outside of cigarette packets. So, and when you buy a cigarette packet, you're literally carrying around like a photo of somebody with like gnarly oral cancer with their lip falling off or a dead baby or whatever. And it's to discourage people from buying, right? And to show them the risk that, that cigarettes carry, nicotine carries. So I think it's really interesting. That would never fly here. I'd never fly in the States, but it's interesting how they do that in other countries.
Yeah, like I can see the pros and the cons, and you can tell by my conversation that I try and keep a balanced perspective. It's hard for me to identify something as being entirely good or entirely bad. There was this story that I read. Oh, I didn't read. It was actually from a documentary called Fierce Grace with Ram Dass, and they were talking to this family that their daughter committed suicide. They were just so destroyed by it. And Ram Dass flew over to them, or they flew over to Ram Dass, and they wrote him a letter in advance and were like, hey, we can't understand why God took our daughter away from us. Like, we don't understand like why this happened. And they were destroyed by it. It sounded like there's so much tragedy and chaos in the world. Like, why would God allow this to happen? And Ram Dass just responded with, it's not that these things are negative or bad. I mean, obviously you should never hurt another person or take somebody else's life. But when you're looking at, the hunger, the people dying from hunger in other countries, when you're looking at the income inequality in America, when you look at, people, all the atrocities that come along with regular everyday life, as far as Ram Dass perspective, and I also think from the Buddhist perspective, like there are people on this planet that are going through various levels of karma that are attached to probably several other lives that they've gone through. And there's a very specific reason why they're going through the motions of these things. And from the universal perspective, it's not about what's good or bad. It's just about God trying to understand, or God trying to gain perspective through the vantage point of people. So when we see things that seem to be sort of atrocities, what we can also see is God, going through these experiences in order to understand itself, but at the same time, these experiences existing so that people like me or you can develop ways to, help people cultivate more love, right? Because a lot of these teachings that we're talking about a lot of shadow, we're talking about a lot of light, but all of these polarities need to exist for us to even awaken to the higher self.
The higher self. Yeah. That makes sense.
There's a much bigger thing at work. And it needs both of those things to exist in order for us to get to that point. I think that's what the chakras journey from the root to the 1,000-petaled lotus is all about. It's about, at the very beginning, it's all about survival. There's this fear of being killed because you somehow just think that you're human. But as you get past the heart chakra and illuminate all the other chakras above it, you start realizing that sort of perspective of death is arbitrary. Like, you can't die.
Yeah.
So you sort of awaken to the fact that you are an eternal spirit, but you could have never gotten to that place unless you've gone through your share of atrocities and your share of difficult situations.
For sure.
So there's got to be a platform for those things to exist.
So if we were flowers, I think that we would both be lotus flowers because they have their roots and they grow out of muddy, murky, dark waters.
Yeah.
And then, grow into something beautiful.
That's
on
true.
The surface.
Yeah.
How about that shit?
I love that shit. I saw a few lotuses at a botanical garden a while back, and it's so cool that they do that. It's a really, really great example,
Mushrooms too.
Yeah. They're just growing like spores out of the ground. I've seen actually some in Pasadena.
Oh, have you?
I was walking all willy-nilly down the street, and I just happened to see some growing out of a tree, and I was like, whoa.
We're like, whoa. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are just like this crazy neural network.
Yes. What was that mushroom? Did you watch that mushroom documentary? Oh man, I wish I could remember the name of it. Oh, it was an awesome one. Yeah. And it had footage of like the neural network that they create underground.
Oh yeah.
As they're growing.
I think I know which one you're talking
about.
I've seen.
I saw it at Lightning in a Bottle. They did like a little, shit.
We were talking about the other day, maybe it would have been on the podcast, but not about like us, our existence, like our life is like a sort of like a neuron or a synapsis in the mind of God, right? So every thought that you think from the galactic perspective, so basically see Earth.
Fantastic Fungi, that's what it is.
Fantastic Fungi?
Yeah, Fantastic Fungi.
That's a documentary?
It's a film, yeah.
Oh, it is a film?
Yeah.
Fantastic Fun. I want to be a fantastic fun guy.
You are a fantastic fun guy. You're already that.
Did you see what I did there?
Yeah, I saw what you did there. Uh-huh.
Yeah, fantastic fun guy. But the reason why I bring this up is we were talking, think of Earth as like a big head, or think of just a solar system as like a body. And then think of us human beings as being neurons inside of that head. And as we think, we're creating full thoughts in the mind of God. And I think of things like mushrooms. Once you tap into those, you're tapping into probably one of the strongest sort of ideas and perceptions of the galactic sort of source energy.
Yeah.
That's why it blows your fucking mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
So taking it back to what we were talking about, gender roles, I think I'm all for female equality, but women have been made to feel like being a woman is not empowering. And I think men really need to change the dynamic. Basically, what I'm trying to say is women, it's almost like they're striving to do all the things that men do as a way to prove that they're equal.
Right.
As if somehow the things that they already do aren't enough.
Right.
Like they're not seen as valuable, but they are.
They are.
Women, female energy, I think is the moderating force in our universe.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, the earth is a feminine energy. You can tell just by the way that it moves and the way nature communicates. And also even just in the softness that a female has, there's something about there's female energy that I think permeates the cosmos and everything. And I think it's really important for men to show up for that and to create a safe space so that women can fully embody that. And I think the best place to start is by acknowledging the fact that women are fucking powerful, I
like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not about maxing out the amount of labor that you can put into a 40-hour work week. It's about really accepting your masculine and your feminine traits inside and celebrating both of those in balance. And as a man, we need to be able to show up for our women by being solid in ourselves, because the whole reason why we got into this mess is because men didn't protect women. They didn't make them feel safe.
Yeah.
And then on the outside of that, women developed this sort of hard, thick skin against men. And we asked for it in a lot of ways through our media, through how we objectified women in the past. So I think we're part of the age of Aquarius that we're coming into is about men are going to start taking responsibility for the fact that we have contributed to that. Mm-hmm. But also women are going to embody that power and become like teachers to all of us. Yeah. You know?
That's really nice.
Yeah. We're going to make it happen, Jen.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, this was really fun. This was a fun episode.
It was.
Yeah. I really enjoyed talking about this.
Yeah, me too. I'll send you over the coochie consultation so you could send it over to your cronies. I'm just kidding. J/K. What we can do is we can put together a gathering and, download it as PDF and then print it up as a document. And then we can sort of circle around the fire and just throw it into the fire and have this sort of like full moon ceremony around it.
Seriously. This poor girl. Somebody give this girl a hug.
Yeah, I know.
She needs a hug. She needs a little real love. Yeah. Not sexual love.
Yeah. Just good old fashioned love.
Good old fashioned love. Just a,
But she may very well be on the right path considering she's so young. Mm-hmm. She's gonna continue going down that road of meeting men that will sort of feed into that, and then that one guy will come.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a pendulum swing, right?
The one guy's gonna come.
She's on the very extreme end, so she'll start coming back.
Yeah, the one guy will come, and he'll be like, "Hey, look at me. Yeah. What are we doing?
You don't have to act like this.
It's gonna be like, what are you doing? What are we doing here?
Yeah.
What is the goal? Like, you don't need to do this.
I need to do this.
And she'll be like,
oh,
okay.
Maybe you're right.
Maybe you're right. Maybe hopefully.
I'm glad that we planned her life out for her.
Yeah, by the grace of God, hopefully she runs across this podcast and she, finds
get some therapy. Yeah,
some therapy in it.
Yeah, get some therapy, my friend.
Yeah, get some therapy. Yeah, it was fun. This is a really good episode. We'll talk more about this some other time, but thank you all for tuning in. Divine Nobody's podcast. You can also find this episode on YouTube. You can like and subscribe to all the things. We post these things weekly. We also have clips and things like that, but you can also find us on IG. Divine.Nobody's, I don't even say dot. Divine.Nobody's podcast. I think that's good, right?
That's good.
All right. We'll see you guys next time. Namaste, friends.
Namaste.